Hello, everyone. This week we'll be discussing enhancing family functioning. The first thing that we need to consider is when would you choose to work with the entire family versus simply working with an individual? This is your first lecture quiz question. Some situations that you might choose to work with the entire family might be if there's a child having some major behavioral problems that's interfering with their schoolwork, if there's been some major trauma in the family, such as a loss of a family member, if they've relocated, if a family member has been incarcerated. This is a shared experience across family members. If there's domestic violence, a divorce in the family, so you'd be working with the parents and their kids to kind of assist with co-parenting, or if there's some major parent-family conflicts. This is not a comprehensive list, but these are just some situations where you might choose to work with the entire family rather than working with one person in particular. When we think about working with families, the first thing we need to think about is what type of family are we working with? And there's essentially two types of families. There's functional families, and then there's dysfunctional families who really have some major structural issues that would need to be addressed. When we think about functional families, these individuals would have economic security, so they wouldn't have income problems. Household tasks are evenly distributed amongst the family members, so one person isn't really completely in charge of cleaning and cooking and taking care of the kids. Both parents are kind of involved in that. People in the family feel like they belong. They feel like it's a cohesive group and that people care about one another. Yet at the same time, they also feel like they have independence from the family. So if we're thinking about children, they feel that their parents love them, but the kids also feel that they have some autonomy to make their own decisions. Functional families have well-defined rules and procedures. Kids know what to expect from their parents. There's also horizontal hierarchy between the parents. What that means is when it comes to horizontal, so horizontal is going across. So that means both parents are equal. So if there's going to be a decision made in the family, the two parents would be making that decision together rather than one parent really having control over the other parent. So there's horizontal hierarchy between the parents. So the two parents are on an even playing field. And there's vertical hierarchy from the parents to the children. So the parents are ahead of the kids. If you think of how decisions are made, it goes from the children to the parents, okay? So again, horizontal hierarchy, parents are equal. Vertical hierarchy going up and down, parents are the ones who are in charge of the kids. If the kids start to run the family, that's when we start to see a dysfunctional family. If you have some sort of role reversal and the children are kind of in charge. In dysfunctional families, there's likely overdependence on one family member. So it might be that the mother or the father is really taking much more of a stronger role in running the household and managing the kids than the other family member. There's really blurred relationships between the parents and the kids. Kids don't know what the rules are. There's no set bedtimes, no set curfews. They really don't have any limits on their behaviors. There's a lot of communication problems amongst family members. Emotional manipulation is used to control the family members, and those kind of reinforce those communication problems. And all of these are products of interfamily relationships that would need to be addressed. So when we actually go to engage dysfunctional families, some of the things that we need to think about, the first is that you're working with the entire family. So the whole family is your target of change. Rather than one individual behavior, you need to work with everyone in the family. The other thing is that family members are support systems for one another. So when you're assessing individuals and you're assessing what their resources are, family members are part of each other's resources, and they should be able to depend upon one another and rely upon one another. It's really important that you do have participation of all family members. However, you cannot force people to participate. So if certain family members don't want to be involved, that is their choice. But I would highly recommend providing them some education on why it's important that everyone's engaged. So specifically, if we're thinking about behavior problems of a child, it may be that the siblings don't want to be involved because this isn't my problem, I'm not having behavioral problems. Or maybe one of the parents doesn't want to be involved, that they feel like, again, that this is just the kid's problem, they need to deal with it. They might not fully grasp how this is more about family systems and family relationships, and how the whole family really needs to be involved in making a change. The other thing that needs to be considered are cultural perspectives. So in some cultures, you might need to first engage certain family members. There's different layers of respect that kids show for parents depending on culture. So you do need to be aware of those cultural differences and recognize that if you're looking at a family and you might classify them as dysfunctional, are they dysfunctional based on your cultural bias, or are they do they really have some underlying dysfunctions in how the family operates? So you do need to be aware of cultural differences that might be kind of influencing some of the communication patterns in the family. Other things to consider when you're intervening with them is, what strategy are you going to use? So in one strategy in working with family members is you kind of address the presenting problem rather than addressing really the underlying family dynamic. So let's say that you're a school social worker and you're helping a child who has some major behavioral problems in school. It may be that those behavioral problems have to do with some really major family dynamics, but your kind of the first order approach isn't to address those underlying family dynamics. The first order is, how can we really solve this problem in the short term? So in the short term, if you're working with a kid who has behavioral problems, think about different problem solving approaches. So we've talked about task-centered planning throughout the semester is what you're working on with your client. So let's implement some specific tasks that the parents can work on, that the child can work on, in action steps. You might also do some skills training, provide some skills training with the parents. So this is your second lecture quiz question. So what type of skills training might you implement with parents of a child with a behavioral problem? So it might be that you teach them parenting skills such as proper discipline, age-appropriate reward. So if you do a sticker chart, what would be some appropriate rewards for a child who's 10 versus a child who's 15. You might be working with parents on their communication skills with their child, such as using I statements to teach parents how to properly communicate their feelings with their kids, and to use assertive communication rather than passive communication. So all of these would be different types of skills that you are providing the parents that will ultimately help them with their parenting and then help the child with their behavioral problems in school. So this is kind of that first approach that you would take is, in the short term, how can I help this family? However, you also need to think about helping the family in the long term, because if you don't address the underlying family processes, then the behaviors will probably continue to pop up. So if we're thinking about the underlying family dynamics at play here, the first part would be trying to understand what is the structure of this family. So that might be if there's different, alignments. So if there's 3 siblings and 2 of the siblings are really close and the third always feels left out, or if certain siblings feel closer to different parents, those are things that you would need to be able to understand so you could address those to try to help the family feel closer. So if the child, if the child that you're trying to assist with their behaviors, they has 2 siblings who are really close and they always feel left out, maybe that's part of the reason they're acting out in school, because they're not getting a lot of attention at home. So maybe you help the siblings engage in activities to bond. Maybe you have the one identified sibling go on little outings with one sibling at a time, play games together, more family activities to try to enhance the bonding. It also looks at the hierarchy. So again, if there's no vertical hierarchy between parents and kids, and the kids are kind of the ones running the show, teaching parents how to really take charge and the importance of rules and setting those boundaries, and the kind of the clear outlines between this is the role of the parent and this is the role of the child. So to really understand what the family structures is, you can do what's called structural mapping. And a form of structural mapping is a genogram. So that is your third lecture quiz question. So a genogram is where you map out on the family the different relationships. So if people have difficult relationships with certain family members, that would be outlined on the genogram. The other thing that you would need to assess is the rules of the family. So what are the explicit and implicit rules that kind of guide the family system? And based on the rules, the parents' behaviors are going to change, and the way that they react to different situations will be altered based on the family rules. So if we think about, implicit rules. So implicit rules are things that are stated. So kids know what they're supposed to do. Implicit, that's explicit. Explicit rules are rules that kids are fully aware of. They're explicitly stated, so they're stated out loud. These are also called apparent rules. So a rule in your family might be that each person has to clear their plate after dinner. So each child is in charge of bringing their plate to the dishwasher. And that would be something that everyone is aware of, and that is something that mom and dad have told them time and time again. So that is clearly stated. We also have implicit rules. So these are covert rules that everyone knows, but you just don't always say it. So like in my family growing up, one of our implicit rules was that we needed to ask if we wanted to have a friend over, or if we wanted to go to a friend's house, we would ask mom for permission. We would not ask dad for permission, because dad would simply tell us to go ask mom. So maybe that was some, mom was more in charge of the kids, so there was not always that even distribution of who's taking care of the kids, but we knew to ask mom, because dad knew that mom was the one who was going to be the one making that decision. So that was an implicit rule. No one ever really stated out loud that mom was the one in charge of making that decision, but we all knew it. The other thing you need to think about are the behavior and the communication patterns. So how do parents respond to one another? How do they perceive the other family members? So it might be that they always perceive their counterpart, the other sibling, as being really aggressive towards them, that they use really aggressive language. And that might be a misconception that the sibling's like, I've never been aggressive to you. That's not really my intent. So they might be thinking that a negative behavior or a negative reaction is occurring when it really isn't. And that can cause some major negative reactions on the part of the sibling. Thinking about communication patterns, so how parents and kids give and receive feedback. So are parents, really recognizing things that their kids are doing? Are they saying good job, congratulations? And do kids feel appreciated by their parents, and vice versa? So, asking them, how do you send messages that let family members know you care about them? How do your kids know that you care about them? How can your partner show that they care about them? All of these would be part of those communication patterns. And these would be important to, again, address the underlying structures within the family.